cut off at 18, I thought I was done with them. But at Grandpa's $2,500,000 will reading, my parents walked in, grinning, acting like they owned it, until the lawyer said I got everything and they only inherited $1. Hey Reddit, figured I'd finally share something that's been sitting with me for a while. A few years back, I got thrown into a situation with my family that honestly felt like something out of a bad movie. Let's just say money was involved, people showed their true colors, and I learned real fast who actually had my back. I didn't plan for any of it, but looking back now, I wouldn't change a thing. If you ask my parents, I, Jack, 28 male, was born defective. Not physically, but in their eyes, everything about me was wrong from the start. I wasn't into football, I didn't care about brand names, and I'd rather draw or mess around with sketchbooks than polish Dad's car on weekends. That was enough for them to decide I was the disappointment kid. Meanwhile, my sister Helene could fart in public, and somehow it would be adorable. She was their golden child, and they made sure everyone knew it. Growing up in that house, everything was about image. My mom loved being the queen of the neighborhood. She'd throw block parties and act like she ran the place, even though she was just a part-time teacher. Dad was a regional manager at some logistics company, and he thought that made him king of the world. Together, they cared about one thing: how we looked to others. Helene fit perfectly. Straight A's, cheerleader, had the right friends. She got rewarded for breathing. When she turned 17, they handed her the keys to a brand new car. A week later, I asked if I could borrow the car for a school project. Dad told me, be grateful for the hand-me-downs. And that was my life. Hand-me-downs, lectures, and sarcasm from people who thought they were building me into a man. Money was their favorite weapon. Helene's tuition? Fully covered. My tuition? If you want college, figure it out yourself. Helene got a new laptop when she graduated high school. I asked if I could at least get a used one. My mom rolled her eyes and said, Jack, you've always been too sensitive. Stop expecting the world to hand you things. Translation: we blew the budget on your sister, you're on your own. The worst part wasn't the unfair treatment. It was the way they spun it. They made me feel like I was crazy for even noticing. If I said, why does Helene get all this stuff and I don't? They'd hit me with lines like, life's not fair, or stop comparing yourself, be a man. It wasn't tough love. It was just straight favoritism, with a fake moral speech attached. By the time I was 16, I'd already figured out the score. No matter what I did, I'd never be enough for them. They had Helene, the golden goose, and me, the problem they tolerated until I was old enough to kick out. And trust me, they didn't hide that plan. One night at dinner, Dad put down his fork, looked straight at me and said, if you're still under our roof by 18, you're a failure. He said it like he was delivering a football play. My mom just smirked into her wine glass, and Helene giggled. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? Pretend it didn't sting? They counted down the years like they were waiting for my eviction. By 17, Helene had a credit card with Dad's name on it. I had a part-time job at a hardware store that barely paid for gas. Every time I tried to push back, it turned into a lecture. You need to be grateful. You need to earn your place. Blah, blah, blah. Basically, they wanted me to be invisible until the day they could toss me out guilt-free. And that day came on my 18th birthday. Most kids get cake, maybe a surprise party. I got a performance. They sat me down in the living room like it was an intervention. Dad crossed his legs. Mom had this smug look. Helene sat there pretending to be supportive. Then Dad hits me with, we're cutting you off financially. Time to learn the value of hard work. Like I hadn't been working already. Like I was some spoiled brat who had been living off their generosity. Newsflash, their support barely covered food, but they treated it like they were handing down a royal decree. I asked, so what now? And Dad, with a straight face, said, pack your things. You'll thank us one day. No hug, no safety net, not even $20 for groceries. Just happy birthday, you're someone else's problem now. So I grabbed a backpack, stuffed in 2 changes of clothes, my old sketchbook, and walked out. I remember looking back at the house. Helene standing in the doorway holding her new phone, smirking like she'd won something. That night, I slept in the backseat of my beat-up car. Cold, cramped, uncomfortable. I stared at the ceiling and thought, so this is it. This is what being a man means to them. But even then, some part of me refused to break. I was angry, yeah, but I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of collapsing. If they wanted me gone, fine. I'd survive. I'd figure it out without them. And here's the part they never understood. When you push someone out like that, you either destroy them or you build something harder than you ever expected. They were betting on the first. They were dead wrong. Because that night in the car wasn't the end. It was the start. The next morning, I woke up stiff, neck sore from sleeping in the back seat. My phone had 3 texts from Mom. Not, "Are you okay?" or "Do you need anything?" Number. It was, "Drop off your house key today." And, "Don't leave trash behind in your room." Real nurturing stuff. I had $48 in my checking account, a gas tank just under half full, and a hardware store shift later that day. That became my routine. Work, crash in the car, shower at the gym where I still had a cheap membership, eat dollar menu meals when I could, ramen when I couldn't. Every time I drove past the house I grew up in, I felt like an outsider in my own life. Helene didn't waste time rubbing it in. A week later, she posted pictures from her sorority house, all smiles with her new laptop on the desk, Dad's credit card conveniently visible in the frame. Caption, "Best parents ever." I scrolled, laughed, and closed the app. It was pathetic, really. Meanwhile, my parents didn't call, didn't check if I was alive. But every now and then, Dad would send some one-liner like, "Hope you're learning responsibility." Translation, "Hope you're failing so I can say I told you so." The only person who gave a damn was my grandfather Jeff. He showed up one Saturday when I was finishing a shift at the hardware store. I walked out to find him leaning against his old Buick, arms crossed, like he'd been waiting. "You planning on sleeping in that car forever?" he asked. I froze. "How do you know?" He smirked. "Because I'm not blind, Jack. Get in." That was Jeff. No dramatic speeches, no guilt trips, just direct. I got in, and he drove me to his house without another word. When we pulled up, he tossed me a spare key like it was nothing. "Couch is yours. Fridge is stocked. Don't argue." That first night, I sat on his couch eating leftover roast beef while he played chess against himself at the dining table. He didn't ask for details, but I could tell he already knew everything. My parents might have fooled the neighborhood, but they never fooled him. From then on, Jeff became my lifeline. He didn't hand me money or coddle me. He gave me something better. Opportunity. On weekends, I helped him fix up rental properties he owned. Painting walls, replacing old pipes, mowing lawns. Real work, but it came with food, a bed, and his blunt advice. "You don't have to be what they say you are," he told me one afternoon while we were tearing out moldy carpet. "You just have to outlast them." I nodded, not saying much, but the words stuck. The next months were a grind. I kept my part-time job, took whatever extra shifts I could get, and stayed on Jeff's couch. My parents? Radio silence. Unless you count Helene. She texted me now and then with gems like, "So sad you couldn't handle college," or "Guess you're finally learning what real life is." I didn't bother replying. What was the point? She lived in a bubble where Daddy's credit card fixed everything. One night, Jeff caught me staring at my paycheck like it was a bad joke. "Not enough?" he asked. "Barely covers gas," I said. He nodded, then pulled out a notepad. "All right, you're going to start tracking everything. Income, expenses, hours. Build the habit now. You'll thank me later." It wasn't glamorous, but it was structure. And Jeff wasn't wrong. Over the next year, I built up enough to stop living out of my car completely. I still didn't have my own place, but Jeff's couch felt more like home than my parents' house ever did. He treated me like a man, not a problem to be solved. There were times it hit me how different he was from the rest of them. Like the time my mom invited him to dinner, probably trying to show off Helene's sorority stories, and he flat out refused. "Not interested in fake family dinners," he told me later with a grin. They had their chance. They blew it. He wasn't subtle, and I loved that about him. By the time I was 20, I'd saved a small emergency fund, thanks to Jeff drilling budgeting into me. My parents still hadn't reached out, unless you count the Christmas card one year that just said, "Merry Christmas, don't waste your potential." I almost framed it out of irony. Jeff, on the other hand, started talking about the future. "One day you'll have more than scraps," he said. "But you've got to be ready. Money without discipline is a curse." I laughed. "Don't worry. Nobody's lining up to hand me money." He just smirked, like he knew something I didn't. Looking back, that smirk should have told me everything. Jeff wasn't the type to brag, but he wasn't clueless either. He knew exactly how my parents operated, and he knew exactly what he was doing with his estate. At the time, I figured it was just one of his cryptic pep talks. Turns out, it was foreshadowing. Fast forward a few years. I'm 27, working steady hours, renting a small apartment, not rich, but not starving either. Jeff had been slowing down, but still sharper than most people half his age. When I got the call that he passed, it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. A week later, I got another call from a law office. They wanted me at the will reading. I walked into an office and immediately wished I'd brought popcorn. My parents were dressed like they were attending the Oscars. Mom's smile looked painted on, Dad leaned back like he owned the place, and Helene was scrolling her phone with her legs crossed like she'd already inherited the money. I took a seat. Mom leaned over, whispering, "Don't worry, Jack. We'll make sure the estate is handled properly." I grinned. "Good to know. Maybe they'll give you $1 for your hard work." She blinked, confused, but didn't reply. Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, cleared his throat. "For the wishes of the late Mr. Jeff Montgomery, his entire estate, valued at approximately $2.5 million, is hereby left to his grandson, Jack Montgomery." Silence. The air got heavy. In my head, I swear I could see Jeff smirking again. Then came the best part. Thompson flipped the page. "Additionally, Mr. Montgomery leaves $1 each to his son and daughter-in-law." He paused, then read the note Jeff had dictated. "You had your chance to raise a son. Consider this my lesson to you." I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not polite, not nervous. A full laugh that echoed in the room. $1. That's generous. Maybe you guys can pool it together and buy a scratch-off. Mom's smile shattered. Dad's jaw tightened so hard I thought he'd chip a tooth. Helene's phone slipped from her hand and smacked the floor. Mom scrambled first. "Well, of course that makes sense. Jack was close to Jeff. But naturally, Jack will need our guidance." I leaned back. "Guidance? You mean like the kind where you tossed me in my car at 18 with no food money?" Hard pass. Dad puffed his chest, steepling his fingers like he was running a meeting. $2.5 million is a lot. It could ruin you if you mismanage it. We'll step in, make sure everything is safe." I smirked. "Safe? You mean safe in your account?" Nice try, but the only thing Jeff wanted safe was me. "From you." Helene chimed in, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Honestly, Jack, don't take this the wrong way, but you've never been responsible. Remember when you maxed out that credit card freshman year?" I laughed again. "Yeah, and I paid it off. Meanwhile, you needed a bailout every time you overdrafted Daddy's card." "Try again," Thompson cut in, deadpan. "Mr. Montgomery's instructions are explicit. No trustees, no oversight. Full control belongs to Jack alone." Dad shifted uncomfortably, but pressed on. "It's only logical we manage this. You don't own property. You don't have investment experience. You're still renting. You'll blow it all if you're not careful." I leaned forward. "You're right, Dad. I rent. You know why? Because unlike you, I don't spend money I don't have trying to impress neighbors I don't like." The lawyer almost cracked a smile but kept reading his notes. Mom tried one more shot, her nails digging into my sleeve. "Sweetheart, maybe we were tough on you, but look how strong you've become. That was our way of preparing you. Let's move forward as a family." I pulled my arm back. "Preparing me? You didn't prepare me. Jeff did. You two just proved his point by showing up here like vultures." Helene, desperate, leaned closer. "You're lucky, Jack. If it weren't for us, you'd drown in this." I stood, sliding the will copy into my bag. Lucky. Number. Luck is being born with two parents who actually give a damn. I wasn't lucky. I was chosen. Big difference. The silence after that was sweet. Mom's face had gone blotchy. Dad couldn't look me in the eye, and Helene sulked like a kid who'd been denied dessert. Thompson wrapped things up. "That concludes the reading. Jack, here is your copy of the will." He slid it across the table. His glance at me said it all. Jeff knew exactly what game was about to start. As we filed out, Mom tried to save face. "Jack, we'll discuss the details at home. You'll come over tonight, won't you?" I laughed under my breath. "You've got your $1. Don't spend it all in one place." Dad muttered something. Helene stomped out in heels clicking like gunfire, and I walked out lighter than I'd felt in years. They thought they were going to walk in and claim victory. Instead, Jeff handed me the crown and handed them a bill for $1. And I made damn sure they knew it. But as much as I enjoyed roasting them in that office, I knew this wasn't the end. They weren't going to walk away. Not with that much money on the line. This wasn't an inheritance. It was round one. I didn't even make it a week before Helene showed up at my apartment uninvited. I came home, and there she was leaning against my door like she owned the building. She smiled, that smug sorority smile she'd perfected, and slipped past me as soon as I opened the door. "Cute place," she said, looking around like she was inspecting a motel. "But let's be real, Jack. This isn't going to work anymore. You're sitting on millions. You'll need something grander." I set the groceries down and raised an eyebrow. "You volunteering to be my decorator?" She plopped onto my couch, crossed her legs, and gave me the look. "Not just decorator. Think bigger. Dad knows investments, Mom knows people, and I know style. Together, we could triple Grandpa's estate." I laughed. "Helene, the only thing you've ever tripled is Dad's credit card balance. Her smile faltered just for a second. I'm serious. You don't know what you're doing. You've been living small for so long you'll embarrass yourself. Let us help before you screw it up. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. Embarrass myself? You mean like storming into someone's apartment uninvited and pitching yourself as my financial manager? Because that's a strong first impression. She huffed, grabbed her bag, and stood. You're going to regret this. Don't be stubborn. Goodbye, Helene. I opened the door. She stormed out. 2 days later, Dad called. First time in years. His tone was all business. Jack, I've prepared some documents for you. Simple investment vehicles. Safe, proven. We'll manage it for you. Minimal effort on your part. Send them over, I said flatly, curious what kind of BS he was trying to get me in. He seemed pleased. Good. I'll drop them by tomorrow. The next day, I opened the envelope. Not simple investments. It was paperwork that, if I signed, would transfer control of estate funds to my parents. I sat at my kitchen table reading line by line, shaking my head. They really thought I was that stupid. I texted Dad one line. Nice try. Try forging my signature instead. It'll save you time. He didn't reply. Then the petty stuff started. Quick pause, fellas. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way. Thanks so much for your support. All right, back to the drama. One morning, I walked down to my car and saw a deep scratch carved into the side, running from bumper to taillight. Not random either. Deliberate. Jagged. Like someone had taken a key to it. The repair shop quoted me more than my old car was worth. I drove it anyway, scratched side and all. The gossip kicked in next. Small town grapevine. At the grocery store, the cashier who used to chat with me barely made eye contact. At the gas station, a woman muttered, "Must be nice living off an old man's money." The message was clear. My parents were running their mouths, painting me as the ungrateful grandson who stole the estate. I stayed quiet on the surface, but I started building my case. I began keeping copies of everything. Dad's investment paperwork. Even texts from Helene, where she flat out said, "You're going to regret not letting us help." At first, the pressure got to me. Sitting at my kitchen table, staring at bills, and hearing the whispers around town, the old doubts crept in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I'd screw this up. Then I remembered Jeff's letter. I dug it out, unfolded the worn paper, and read it again. Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. You decide that. They can only take from you if you hand it to them. I laughed, shaking my head. Jeff had them pegged years before I did. So I leaned into it. The next time Mom called, her voice was syrupy sweet. "Jack, honey, we're just worried about you. Millions is a lot to handle. Let us help so you don't make mistakes." I cut her off. The only mistake Jeff made was not leaving you 50 cents instead of $1. Inflation, you know? Dead silence. Then a sharp inhale before she hung up. That's when I knew I'd gotten under their skin. The keyed car, the gossip, it was all desperation. They thought I'd crack under the pressure. But I wasn't 18 anymore. I'd survived being tossed out with nothing but a backpack. Compared to that, their little circus acts were laughable. This was still round one, but the scoreboard, it was already leaning my way. A week later, the bank called me. Not a friendly courtesy call either. The kind where the manager's voice gets real serious. "Mr. Montgomery, we need you to confirm something. Your father was here earlier trying to represent himself as authorized on your estate account." I almost laughed into the phone. Authorized? That's rich. Did he bring a permission slip signed by Jeff too? The manager didn't laugh, but he did say, "We've flagged the account." Nothing moved. "We've preserved the footage and can cooperate with your attorney. Keep a copy ready," I said. "It'll make a nice addition to my collection." The bank manager called me back a day later. "We've preserved the footage and we're prepared to cooperate with your attorney," he said. Michael subpoenaed it, and within a week I had the copy. It looked less like a financial power play and more like a bad audition for a crime show. Straight into the folder it went. Not long after, I got hit with the next stunt. The real estate scam. A guy shows up at my apartment. Smooth talker type, shiny watch, big smile. He introduced himself as a broker interested in helping manage the properties Jeff left behind. I played along for a few minutes, letting him roll through his pitch about liquidating rentals for maximum value and family efficiency. He kept dropping lines like, "Your parents mentioned you'd be overwhelmed and we can make this easier on you." Then I noticed his business card. His independent email address used the same domain my dad's golf club charity board uses. That told me everything I needed. So I asked casually, "Do you usually do business before or after tea time with my dad?" The color drained from his face. I'm not sure what you mean. I grinned. Don't play dumb. I know you golf with him every Saturday. Next time you pitch me, at least pretend you're not running errands for my parents. He stammered a goodbye and practically tripped over himself leaving. Another win for the folder. Meanwhile, I wasn't just reacting, I was leveling up. I hired a financial advisor named Richard. Guy was plain, middle-aged, wore the same Navy suit every meeting. Exactly the type I wanted. No flash, no hype, just spreadsheets and calm explanations. Conservative portfolio, diversified investments, taxes covered, he said, sliding a plan across the desk. Boring is good when it comes to money. I nodded. Boring sounds perfect. My family's circus is entertaining enough. With his help, I set things up so there wasn't a single crack my parents could crawl through. Next move, I bought a house. Nothing extravagant, no mansion with gates, just a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet part of town. Practical, affordable mine. The first night I walked through those empty rooms, keys in my pocket, it hit me. I finally had a place no one could throw me out of. Word traveled fast. In a town like mine, buying a house was basically a press release. Coworkers congratulated me, neighbors waved more, even my boss noticed. He pulled me into his office after I wrapped up a tough project and said, "You've got leadership in you, Jack. Keep it up." Then he handed me a promotion. Not huge, but enough to get my name in meetings where people actually listened. Of course, the family couldn't stand it. Helene showed up at my housewarming, uninvited. She strutted in like she owned the place, heels clacking on my hardwood floor. "Nice little starter home," she said, glancing around with a fake smile. "Cozy. Don't worry. You'll upgrade once you figure out what you're doing." Neighbors were there, so I let her ramble. Mrs. Patel from next door, the HOA diehard who notices if your grass grows half an inch too high, sipped her wine and watched. Old Mr. Jenkins, a retired mailman with nothing better to do than gossip, leaned on his cane by the doorway. A few co-workers had even stopped by. Helene tried to brag about her latest shopping trip, then switched gears and said, "Honestly, Jack, you don't deserve this house. You barely know how to handle a bank account." Then she slipped. "Dad's been stressing nonstop about losing his position, and you're sitting here pretending you earned all this. They need that money, Jack. You know that." The room went dead quiet. Mrs. Patel's eyebrows shot up. Jenkins gave a low whistle. A couple co-workers exchanged looks. I couldn't have scripted it better. I smirked. "Glad you said that out loud, Helene. Saves me the trouble of explaining why you keep popping up like a bad commercial." Her face went red. She stormed out, muttering under her breath. Neighbors whispered, and just like that, the gossip mill tilted in my favor. But the real shift came when I finally sat down with Michael. He was Jeff's old chess buddy, an attorney who carried himself like he still owned every courtroom he'd ever walked into. We met at a small diner, him sipping black coffee like it was fuel. "Your grandfather anticipated this," he said. "All of it. He wasn't blind to your parents' nature. That's why he structured the estate the way he did." He slid a worn leather notebook across the table. Inside was Jeff's handwriting, pages of notes, reflections, even outlines of possible schemes my parents might try. At the back, detailed counters for each one. I flipped through it, stunned. "He actually wrote all this down?" Michael smirked. "He played chess with your parents long before you were born. He knew their moves." As if that wasn't enough, Michael pulled out copies of sworn statements Jeff had arranged years earlier. His doctor, Michael himself, and even a neighbor had all signed documents attesting Jeff was fully competent when he wrote his will. I leaned back, shaking my head. "So they can scream forgery or not of sound mind all they want, but they're already boxed in." "Exactly," Michael said. "And you'll need this soon, because they're not done." I frowned. "How do you know?" Michael's eyes narrowed, voice calm but heavy. "Because they already tried once. They filed a short-lived petition right after Jeff's death, but the court tossed it on a technicality before anyone had to be served. That's why you never heard about it. They didn't tell you because they're regrouping. Next time, it'll be louder." That hit different. It meant everything so far, the bank stunt, the fake broker, the gossip, wasn't just random desperation. It was them laying groundwork for a bigger play. I closed the notebook, slid it into my bag, and grinned. Then I guess it's almost time for round 2. It didn't take long. A month later, Michael called me again. His voice was calm, but I caught the edge underneath. "Jack, your parents just filed 2 petitions," Michael said. "First, a will contest in probate. They're claiming Jeff wasn't of sound mind and that you manipulated him. Second, a conservatorship petition over you. They're arguing you're financially irresponsible and need them to manage your inheritance." I almost laughed. "So we've gone from bad golf buddies and fake brokers To straight-up courtroom drama? Bold apostrophe. Michael chuckled. Let them be bold. We're ready. The court set both matters for the same morning. The probate contest first, then the conservatorship hearing right after. I showed up in a plain suit. Just me and Michael. My parents were already seated, flanking Helene like she was their emotional support animal. They looked smug, whispering like they'd already won. Mom even had the nerve to smile at me across the aisle, like this was just a family misunderstanding I'd forgive. The judge walked in, called the case, and my parents' attorney got to work. He painted me as irresponsible, untrustworthy, a greedy grandson who manipulated Jeff into changing the will. He even waved around some weak affidavits from family friends claiming Jeff was confused in his final years. Helene nodded dramatically every time he said confused, like she was auditioning for a soap opera. When it was my turn, Michael didn't raise his voice once. He stood, calm and steady, and started laying cards on the table. Your Honor, what we have here is not a question of Jack's competence. It is a case of greed, pure and simple. He handed over the bank footage. Dad on camera, sweaty and stammering, trying to pass himself off as my representative. The courtroom snickered. Dad's face went beet red. Then came the fake broker documents. Next were the letters, carefully worded proposals, where my parents asked me to hand over control. Michael didn't just wave around emails. He brought certified copies, stamped and sealed, along with notarized statements confirming their authenticity. He read a few lines out loud. It's only logical we manage this for you. He raised an eyebrow and added, That's not logic. That's desperation. Helene shifted in her seat, arms folding tighter. But Michael wasn't done. He dropped Jeff's sworn statements, signed years ago by his doctor, Michael himself, and even Jeff's neighbor. They confirmed Jeff was of sound mind when the will was drafted. The affidavits my parents dug up looked like scribbles on napkins compared to these notarized documents. And then came the knockout punch. Michael pulled out the leather notebook. He read Jeff's own words. If they attempt to take what is not theirs, it will be proof enough of why I chose Jack. He is the only one who has earned my trust. The courtroom went silent. The judge leaned forward, reading over the page. My parents' attorney suddenly looked like he wanted to crawl under his table. Mom broke first. She stood, voice trembling but still trying to sound sweet. Your Honor, Jeff was pressured. Jack isolated him from us. He manipulated him. I couldn't hold back anymore. I leaned toward the microphone and said, Is that before or after you kicked me into my car at 18? Just want the timeline straight. The gallery snorted with laughter. Even the judge had to bang the gavel for order. Dad tried next, fists clenched. Jack has no experience. He rents an apartment. He has no investments. He's just a... I cut him off. Correction. I owned a house before you filed this joke of a petition. You're welcome to drive by and admire it, assuming your car still makes it past the driveway without a golf buddy fixing it first. That shut him up. The judge finally spoke, crisp and final. Both petitions are denied. The estate remains in Jack Montgomery's control. Furthermore, this court warns the petitioners. Any further attempts to undermine the explicit wishes of the deceased will not be tolerated. Bang. Case closed. The whole thing was over in under an hour, but the fallout? Immediate. My parents looked like they'd swallowed glass. Helene stormed out first, heels slamming the floor like she was trying to crack it. Dad muttered under his breath but wouldn't look at me. Mom tried one last play, reaching out as I passed. Jack, sweetheart, we only did this for you. You don't understand the pressure? I stopped, looked her dead in the eye and said, No, you did this for yourselves. Grandpa knew it. Now everyone else does too. Her hand froze mid-air before dropping to her side. I walked out lighter than I'd felt in years. For once, they weren't the ones calling the shots. They'd underestimated me every step of the way, and in the end, their own arrogance did the job for me. As I stepped into the sunlight, Michael walked beside me, calm as ever. That was just round 2, he said. I smirked. Yeah, and they're already down 2-0. Because this wasn't just about winning in court. This was about the fallout waiting outside those walls. Neighbors, co-workers, family friends, the same people my parents had fed gossip to for months. They'd painted me as the ungrateful failure. Now, they were the ones branded greedy, manipulative, and exposed. And I wasn't about to waste the advantage. The courtroom victory had done more than shut them down legally. It wrecked their finances. Dad's company didn't like the attention, and after decades of puffing himself up as the reliable manager, he was shown the door with a retirement package that barely covered 6 months of expenses. Mom's part-time teaching checks couldn't keep up with their lifestyle, and Helene, who'd lived on Daddy's money her whole life, Suddenly discovered what declined meant when she tried swiping cards that no longer worked. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. The house that once looked like a magazine cover started slipping. Grass knee-high, paint chipping, porch light burned out and never replaced. Utilities shut off for a few days at a time. Small signs that money wasn't flowing like before. I expected gossip. I expected snide comments. What I didn't expect was for them to show up at my door. It happened on a Thursday evening. I'd just gotten back from a long day at work, kicked off my shoes, and was flipping through Jeff's notebook when the knock came. Slow, heavy, desperate. I opened the door to see all three of them standing there. Mom, Dad, and Helene, lined up like they were about to pitch me a pyramid scheme. Mom started first, voice soft, hands clasped. Jack, sweetheart, we need to talk. Things have been difficult. The mortgage is behind, and your father's retirement wasn't what we expected. You have more than enough. Surely you can help with just a little. Dad jumped in before I could respond. It's not charity. Think of it as an investment in keeping the family stable. We carried the Montgomery name for years. You can keep it strong now. Helene crossed her arms, trying the guilt trip angle. We're still your family. Don't abandon us. Grandpa would want us united. I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, letting them twist. I wanted to hear every excuse, every attempt at dressing up a bailout as family unity. When they finally ran out of air, I spoke. Let me stop you right there. If it weren't for this money, you'd still treat me like dirt. Don't pretend this is about family. It's about bills. You didn't care about me when I was 18 and sleeping in my car, but now that your credit cards are maxed out, suddenly I'm your golden boy? Mom's face tightened. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I cut in. You're not here because you care. You're here because you're broke. I survived without you for years. Now it's your turn. Helene tried again, her voice sharp. So you're just going to let us drown? You'd really do that to your own parents? I smirked. Funny question. You threw me out at 18 with nothing. Consider this symmetry. Dad's fists clenched, but he stayed quiet. I decided to finish it. Jeff left you $1 and a message. You ignored both. Now you get to live with the result. The silence was beautiful. Mom's lip trembled. Helene's eyes darted around like she wanted to disappear. Dad just glared, jaw tight, but he didn't have a word left in him. I shut the door without another sentence. They didn't come back after that. Meanwhile, I kept climbing. Richard managed my money with boring precision, steady growth, no flashy risks. At work, I took on bigger projects, and the promotion I'd earned turned into real leadership. My coworkers actually respected me now, not because of the money, but because I delivered. One evening, driving home, I took a detour past the old house, the place I'd been tossed out of with a backpack. The porch light flickered weakly, lawn overgrown, shutters peeling, the picture of decline. I pulled over across the street, rolled down the window, and just looked. For years, that house had been the symbol of everything I didn't have. Security, acceptance, family. Now it was nothing but wood, paint, and bad memories. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. Just clarity. I whispered to myself, I decide what I'm worth. Then I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the house and them behind for good. Revenge complete. Not by screaming, not by raging, but by thriving while they rotted in their own entitlement.